Hello everybody and welcome back to another video. Today I will be doing my picks for week 28 of the 2020 season of the Overwatch League, the second to last week of the Overwatch League season. A number of teams have already finished their season, but there are still some teams that have some matches to make up. The big ones being Vancouver, London, and Seoul, teams who for a long period of time weren't playing any matches, so they are very far behind, especially, and in North America in general, there's a lot of teams that still have a number of matches to be played. And then in Asia, other than London and Seoul, New York still has a decent amount left, so, well, they have two, I guess, not that many. But we're going to jump into my picks and talk about them. The first game of the week is Seoul versus London. Now, when this video is up, this match will have already happened, so I'm not going to talk about it too much. They play again later in the week, so I'll talk about it more there. But my pick for this one is the Seoul Dynasty. I'll talk about it more later. I want to start primarily talking about the Florida Mayhem taking on the Vancouver Titans. Now, this is a match that I expect to be very one-sided in the favor of the Florida Mayhem. They have been a very good team all season, especially recently. Very good performance from them in the Countdown Cup. 3-1 loss to San Francisco Shock in the semifinals, but a better result than I think many people had expected out of them. So, in general, I think the Mayhem are looking very good, and they are looking better than I think most teams right now. And I think that this is a pretty easy win for them against a Titans team that is still not really performing at a super high level, and that has still struggled throughout their time in the Overwatch League since picking up all of the contenders players. My big pick game on Friday, just so happens to be one, is the LA Gladiators taking on the Dallas Fuel. This is an interesting series for me. The Fuel were a team who I kind of had very high opinions on, of course, when they had Decay and Doha playing with each other. Decay now gone from this team, and with the Washington Justice. Now, the Washington Justice do not play this weekend, which is very interesting. So, something of note is that we will not be seeing Decay this weekend. We'll be seeing him. I don't even know if they play next weekend either, honestly. We might not see him until the playoffs. But the Dallas Fuel with fewer pieces, they were able to squeak by the Washington Justice during the Countdown Cup. The Justice do play next week, by the way. They played the Shock. So the Fuel were able to squeak by the Justice in the Countdown Cup, but I don't feel very confident in them right now. The Gladiators, though, are a team that have been very up and down all season. They've been very inconsistent, and they are seemingly getting things together. The addition of Kevster has really helped them a lot. He's been a huge piece to this team and has been very big in getting them to another level. But they've still had some ups and downs since he's joined. Birdring has still played very well this season. Space has still played very well this season. So it's an interesting matchup. I like the Gladiators in this one. I think it could go either way depending on what we see from the Fuel. Onigod has still played very well this season. And there's a lot of similarities, I think, in the lineup you see between the Gladiators and the Fuel. Very good young contenders player who they brought in late in the season, mid-season type time range, with Kevster to the Gladiators, Onigod to the Fuel. Both have had pretty good seasons so far. But I really do think that the Gladiators have shown more consistency, and they've shown to be a better team, especially now showing that they won the Decay and OG trade that took place during the off-season. But I think this one should be a pretty good one in general, but I think the Gladiators take that one. Moving on to Saturday, we start the day with two matches in Asia. The first one, the New York Excelsior taking on the Seoul Dynasty. Obviously, we will have already seen the Seoul Dynasty once this weekend by the time this match takes place, which is important because I think it's important in general to recognize the fact that the Seoul Dynasty play 3 games this weekend, as do the London Spitfire. But this one in particular is very difficult for Seoul, because if you're Seoul, you know that you can beat London, and you know you can beat London twice. You probably feel like beating New York is a tall task and a very tough task as well. So I think Seoul will put most of their resources into playing against London on Friday and Sunday. I don't expect them to put as much time into trying to beat New York, mainly because I think London is going to do the same thing. I think London's going to look at their week and say, we play Seoul, we play Shanghai, we play Seoul again. If we can get 2 wins over Seoul, that boosts us up to 8 wins on the season. They would feel pretty good, I think, about ending the season with 8 wins minimum. And then you can move on from there to go into the final week, try to get your record up to maybe 10 and 11, which would be a good thing for the Spitfire team. So the reasoning for me is kind of connected, I guess, between the NYXL Dynasty and Dragon Spitfire game, but to focus primarily on the NYXL Dynasty game for now. New York has looked really good recently. A lot of people were very disappointed in New York's play during the Countdown Cup against Shanghai. New York actually, I even went back and watched some of that series, and I watched Plat Chat and Sideshow talked about this. New York had very clear strategies that they were pulling out. Set strategies, players playing in certain areas, playing from certain positions, and Shanghai managed to read all of them, right? Shanghai figured it out pretty quickly, but New York knew what they were doing. New York was competitive against Shanghai. They didn't win any maps, and a lot of people, I think, take that to be, if you don't win any maps and you get swept, that obviously means that it was a one-sided series. It doesn't. It could be the type of thing where you have a matchup that's 52-48, 52%, 48%, and just that 52% every single map just has that extra boost, that extra push that pushes them over the finish line, and that was New York against Shanghai. Shanghai was just that better team. I don't believe Seoul has lived up to where they were back in May in the May Melee. They have not lived up to that expectation. New York has been on the rise. They've been much better recently than they had been earlier in the season. I think Bianca has really reinvigorated this NYXL roster. They're coming off of a win over Guangzhou in both the Countdown Cup qualifiers and the Countdown Cup itself. I think New York should be very confident against this Seoul Dynasty team, and I think they will take the win. Moving on to the Dragons versus the Spitfire. The Dragons coming off a very dominant performance in the Countdown Cup. And I don't expect much to change. The Dragons and the Spitfire have had some close series so far this season, especially when London pulls out weird looks, I guess. I mean, they looked pretty good in both the May Melee and the Countdown Cup qualifiers when they played against the Shanghai Dragons. But it seems like every time London has a good series against Shanghai, it's followed up by a dreadful performance against Shanghai. I would expect the same thing. More so for this week, though, I think a lot of that comes down to the fact that London knows they can't beat Shanghai. They're going to go into that match, and they're going to attempt, to beat them. They're going to give that match their all, I think. But I think realistically, the London Spitfire don't expect to beat Shanghai. A lot of times when London plays against Shanghai, London just lets the Dragons do whatever they want. It was a huge problem when they played them back in June. I hope London doesn't do that. They did it recently against Hangzhou. I really, really, really don't want to see that London Spitfire come out. We've seen it a lot. I don't want it. Please don't allow it to happen. I think it's an interesting team in general. I think it's an interesting game that could be a bit of a sleeper pick for a good match and a good series, but ultimately I think Shanghai probably wins that one 3-0. First North America game on Saturday is the Atlanta Reign taking on the Paris Eternal. A game that I was tempted to make a big pick game, but there's some other games that are a little bit better. But this is a pretty good matchup. The Eternal struggled a bit in the Countdown Cup, especially against the Philadelphia Fusion. A good team, the Eternal. Didn't look super great, and I'm worried about them going forward with the Genji nerfs. I don't think Sparkle will be able to be as dominant. They were running a decent amount of Doomfist compositions in the Countdown Cup qualifiers. They had been running some kind of weird Doomfist stuff that I think is potentially what they're going to try to run. I don't expect the Eternal to run kind of classic compositions and meta compositions unless it were to be a meta surrounding Doomfist. I just think it doesn't really fit the Eternal's playstyle. Not that they can play Genji anyway, because Genji's banned in this hero pool. They can't play Tracer. They can also not play who? Zarya, I think. And I don't remember which support they can't play. I really don't remember. Anyway, I will figure that out. But I just think this is a weird matchup for the Eternal, because I don't know what to expect out of them. The Atlanta Reign have been a very up and down team all season. They've had good moments. They've had bad moments. They have not been the best heroes, in my opinion, or the best team in my opinion. They've been super inconsistent. But recently, I think they've started to have looks that have been somewhat better than what they've had in the past. They've been trying to, of course, integrate Saucy into this lineup. They've been trying to integrate Iris into this lineup. And I think once they do integrate Iris into this roster, it will be really, really good, because I think Iris is an incredible player. One of the top in the league right now, coming out of contenders, because he was really, really good playing for Third Impact. And I would expect similar things from him in the Overwatch League. He's an upgrade over Dogman, at the very least. So it's an interesting team to look at. Ultimately, I still think the Paris Eternal are the better team, and I think they will win. I'm curious to see what compositions they run. Obviously, the hero pool, a little different now, with no Tracer, no Genji. So it'll be interesting to see how the meta shapes up. But I am excited to see that this matchup in particular has the possibility to be a very, very, very interesting and new rivalry heating up that I think could be really, really cool. It's a match I'm looking forward to, though ultimately I do think the Eternal will take the win. The next match in North America is the Vancouver Titans against the Dallas Fuel, a rematch of the Titans' first win in the Overwatch League with the new roster. I don't think the Titans win this time around. Yes, there is no decay on this Dallas Fuel roster. It is Onigod. It is Doha. And there is no head coach for this team, just an interim head coach. But I don't think that means the Dallas Fuel aren't better than the Titans. I still think the Fuel should win this game. I think they're the better roster. They have more talent right now. They have more synergy. They're playing in person with each other in the same household or office, as opposed to what we were seeing, or what we are seeing with this Vancouver Titans roster, where they're, strewn about the world. I don't really think this one is going to be close. It shouldn't be, in my opinion. I think the Dallas Fuel should be able to win this one pretty handily. Then again, I thought the same thing last time these two teams played, and it didn't happen then. So, what are the odds of it happening now? I guess only time will tell. I think there's some good players on the Titans, obviously. I've talked a lot about how much I like KSA and I like Shockwave. And we've seen a ton of improvement from Karkar recently. So this is a team that's certainly on the rise and are getting much better. But I still think the Fuel have their number. Second to last North America game for Saturday is the Boston Uprising taking on the LA Gladiators. A rematch of the last time the Boston Uprising got a win. So that is pretty nice. The league has changed a lot since that match. At the time we were looking at the Uprising as a team on the rise. They almost beat the Eternal twice. And then, of course, they had a good series the previous week to those two near wins over the Eternal. They had beaten the Gladiators. So the Uprising at the time were looking very good, looking like they were on the rise, looking like they could be one of the teams to kind of turn things around at the end of the season. Obviously, that didn't happen, and they have still struggled since that moment. The Gladiators, as I said before, with the match against the Fuel, are a good team that have just been inconsistent. They have looked way better with Kevster in the lineup, and they figured out how to work in more pieces into this lineup to make it work, putting Mirror in at the Zarya if need be, putting Mirror in at support if need be, switching pieces around to kind of work with the roster more, as opposed to just subbing in LH Cloudy sometimes, or the occasional Jaru sub. they've done a lot more to kind of work pieces into this roster and play different styles and strategies in ways that, even if they are kind of gimmicky gotcha strategies, they seem to work pretty well. So this is an interesting team to look out for as the season kind of winds down and we get into the playoffs and the postseason. I'm intrigued by the Gladiators, and I think they shouldn't really have any trouble beating the Uprising in this match. The final North America match on Saturday is the rematch of the Countdown Cup Finals. Already, even though we just had it. And it's San Francisco Shock taking on the Philadelphia Fusion. It is my big pick for Saturday and my second and final big pick for the week. I am once again picking the Shock. I picked the Shock to win the Countdown Cup, even though a lot of people were not picking the Shock, and many people were saying that the Countdown Cup would go the direction of the Fusion. I never lost faith in the Shock. Here they are again against the Fusion. Slightly different meta. Obviously, Genji will not be as strong. There is no Tracer. I actually think that helps the Fusion a lot. It means that you don't have to worry about the Striker Tracer. You're going to most likely see some type of double shield composition, maybe with Ashe or Widowmaker, I would imagine. So you do have to worry about the Ans pick with Carpe. There might also be Sombra play, where I think that Hisu Sombra was pretty good in the Countdown Cup, and Strikers was okay. It was kind of an up and down weird match in terms of the Sombra play. There's a chance that this meta could work in the Fusion's favor, but I don't think it will. I think this one goes the way of the Shock. They're just too good right now. They're too dominant. And if the Fusion couldn't beat them in the dive meta in the Countdown Cup, I don't have much faith in them being able to beat the Shock in this match. Moving on to Sunday, we have the Seoul Dynasty taking on the London Spitfire. Obviously, as I mentioned before, that is the first match of the weekend, but it is also the first match of Sunday. I'm predicting Seoul to win both of these matches. I know London has had some success against Seoul. I believe they beat them once so far this season. The London Spitfire have started to dip a bit. They've had some good performances here and there this season, but they haven't really found a ton of success in Asia. And I think a lot of that comes down to the fact that Asia is a very good region. It's a very tough region. There's a lot of really good teams in Asia. Teams that if they were in North America, I think they'd be doing way better than they would be if they were in Asia. And I think that's part of what it makes it so interesting to watch this London Spitfire team, because I think they, on the outside, seem a little disappointing, but really they're just unlucky because they're playing with teams that are unfortunately better than they are. The Seoul Dynasty have struggled a lot this season as well. They have not been super consistent. They've had really iffy play from a number of their players, but the addition of 2U, I think, was very good for this team. I think he brings a lot to this team. He brings a huge boost to this team in terms of more flex tank play, something that they very desperately needed. He is a two-way player, so I don't know if we will see a lot of 2U here throughout the rest of the season, but he is a very big piece for this team, a very good piece that provides a lot for this team, and I think that he is a player to look out for to potentially help the Seoul Dynasty team have a really good late season run. I think they just match up well against London in this instance. It's going to be difficult to win both of these games. I wouldn't be surprised if they split this series. It wouldn't surprise me at all, just because the nature of playing 3 games in a week can really change a lot of things. And I think that is really crucial for this rematch. But I just like Seoul better. I think Seoul have shown more consistent play. They have a higher peak. They have a ton of really good all-star players, and I think that they will win this one because of that. But I think it'll be pretty close both times. Moving on to North America, the San Francisco Shock take on the Toronto Defiant. Easy pick for me. I'm taking the Shock. Shock are the better team. They've looked better all season. The Defiant have had their moments. They looked pretty good against the Gladiators in the Countdown Cup, but they don't have many big wins, many good wins. They're just an okay team that have had some decent results, but I don't have a ton of faith in this Defiant team to be able to do much against a very good and dominant Shock team. Moving on, the Florida Mayhem take on the Los Angeles Valiant. Without Tracer or Genji, I don't really know what types of compositions the Valiant will want to run. I would imagine some type of Ashe composition that plays around either a May or a Reaper or a McCree. I mean, a McCree Ashe seems kind of weird. I don't really know what the DPS composition is going to be. It's a little odd. Both of these teams do suffer from not having the Tracer play. Obviously, you have Yaki on the Florida Mayhem. You have Shax on the LA Valiant, two very good Tracer players who excel on that hero in particular. So it'll be interesting to see what both of these two teams run, but I like the Mayhem better. I think BQB is so good, and I think even not having Tracer or Genji, Yaki is a very good player as well. I think both of those two will show up and have great performances against a Valiant team, which is also very good and has put up many good performances this season. They're probably the 5th best team in North America, just behind the Mayhem. But ultimately, I go in the direction of the Mayhem. I like their tank line better. I like their support line better. I think Yaki and BQB are both really good players. Final match of the weekend is the Vancouver Titans taking on the Atlanta Reign. I think the Reign take this series win. Like I said, I think they're on the rise. I think they're looking better. I think as Iris gels with this roster more, and as Saucy gels with this roster more, this team's only going to get better. They definitely still have some weaknesses. They don't have a really great hit scan player right now. They're relying mostly on Sharp for that, and Edison. Neither of them are exceptional at it. Edison's good at some. He's not really like a great Widowmaker Ashe player, so it'll be interesting to see what happens with this Reign team down the stretch. But right now, Titans, not a super tough team, a match that I think the Reign should be able to beat, and Titans play 3 games this weekend. That's a lot of games to play. An exhausted team that has to do a lot of prepping for 3 different teams versus a Reign team that only has to prep for 2 matches. I go the favor of the Reign for this one. Real quick, I will just throw up my spreadsheet of picks just so you can see it beforehand, but that is before I end the video. Anyway, that is where I'm going to end this video off for today. If you enjoyed, consider liking and subscribing for more content like this in the future. I hope you're all staying safe and staying healthy. But until next time, I am going to get out of here. Thank you so much once again. And bye-bye.